Hi everybody, welcome to this session. This is the first in a occasional series of videos that I'm going to do where I'm going to show you some stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So what I've got here is a head that I've been making over a few weeks as part of the demonstrations that I do when I teach an on-site workshop. So we go over the structure of the skull and all the muscles, and then eventually skin and fat. And as I show those different components, I do explanatory drawings, but I also sculpt the head in ZBrush here live as I'm talking. And in between sessions, I do a little bit of cleanup and a little bit of detailing. And I'm just going to show you part of that process here. And as I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the anatomy and some things that I'm thinking about while I do so. And I thought this might be good because there are certain things that you can do when you're teaching a formal class or a digital course that are really good from the point of view of providing a structured experience. But there are sometimes little details and little incidents that you can't really get to when you do that. And I thought that looking behind the scenes a little bit might be interesting from that point of view. So you should get a few hopefully useful bits of information out of watching this. So what I'm going to be doing is you can see that these facial muscles have been placed, but they're not terribly well integrated into the rest of the face yet. So that's what I'm going to be concentrating on today, is just getting them to kind of fuse a little bit more. So for instance, this is one of the facial muscles that is responsible for your kind of snarl or lifting up of the upper lip. I always try and get people to think of Elvis. I'm just going to pull this out. So if we were activating this muscle, it would be something like this. So it's pulling on the lip like that, and the way that this goes is it kind of attaches and integrates to just under the orbicularis oculi, the muscle of the eye. So I'm just going to make that happen. Also, when I'm doing this, I'm just kind of cleaning it up so it looks a little bit better. It's not, however, a fully detailed finish that I would do if I was making a final asset for a render scene or for something else. The more finished a piece is, the sort of, sounds obvious I guess, but the longer it takes. And the final 5-10% of refinement takes a really long time. It takes me a long time anyway. The example I always give in classes is that sometimes that kind of stuff can be a bit like, you could think of it a bit like an athlete running 100 meters. Maybe every sort of athlete above a certain level can do that very, very well, but winning and losing kind of comes down to 100th of a second sometimes. And I find that like getting a model really right and really strong, that last bit, that's really takes a lot of time and effort. I guess more time than anything. It's really where patience comes into play for me. And I think that don't underestimate patience. Actually, skill's important, but patience can really do a lot for you. Okay, so let's look at this. This is the muscle I was just detailing, is the zygomatic major, and you can see that is going to be pulling the corner of the mouth that way. So that's going to be affecting your, the smile really. And it's got a twin here, the zygomatic minor, that's going to be moving like that. And if you think that all of these muscles have the ability to work in concert with one another, so they often don't act alone, and you start getting some idea of why there's so much variety in that is possible in the facial feature, facial expression, and so on. All of these different variables. Again, a favourite example that I like to use is thinking of how you might make if you're making a security code, and if you have two numbers, it's not very secure because that isn't a lot of variables. But if you make it 4 numbers, it's much more secure because suddenly you've got so many more possible combinations. So as you add variables, the possible combinations increase exponentially. And if you think about just the number of muscles in the face and their possible combinations, you start to really get a sense of just how complex this is and how that's going to create so much variety. And that's not even taking into consideration the issue of asymmetry, right? The face is different on both sides, so you can have so much going on. I'm not even going to try and do the names today because it's hard sculpting and talking at the same time, but there's so many of these muscles that today I'm just going to give myself a free pass and not worry about that. You can look them up. I can tell you what they do. The good thing about the facial muscles is that they are really logical. You know, you can, like I say, you can see that by imagining what they do. You know, you can see that this one is fixed down here to the bone and it's fixed to the fleshy muscle up here. So you can see that that's going to be pulling the lip corner down. And this one here is going to be pulling the mouth back. So they're relatively easy to understand in that way. Again, if you take the time just to slow down, you can kind of get a handle on it. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in studying the anatomy of the face, that you buy a skull, a good quality reproduction of a skull. And on that note, actually, a video that I'm planning to do soon is a video about my favourite anatomical resources, because in that I will show you a good source for buying skulls and stuff. It's a great thing to have because you can really take the time to study it. The skull is absolutely key, but what you can then do is get some clay and sculpt all this stuff right on top. And yes, it's a hard experience to beat in terms of getting a sense of what's really going on, because as you sort of figure out where things are supposed to go, it develops a really strong memory, I think, in that you remember what it feels like to do that. And it's a bit like how you remember walking around a particular place, and it's different to the kind of memory you get when you're studying diagrams and so on. So sculpting is a really great way to see how these things fit together. So the muscle I'm working on now is the masseter. This is one of your kind of eating muscles. And again, you can see all the facial muscles are... This muscle is kind of more similar to muscles in the rest of the body, in that it's crossing a joint and it's going from bone up here, the cheekbone, to the jaw down here, and it's helping to pull the jaw up, and it's involved in the kind of grinding of the teeth. But the muscles of the facial expressions are slightly different insofar as they start from a bone, but they don't attach to a bone. They're kind of free floating, so they might plug into another muscle like the orbicularis oris, or this one actually attaches to the kind of skin, really, or the sort of tissue above this muscle. So they're a little bit more unusual in that way because they're pushing and pulling the skin rather than articulating a joint. So that's something just to watch out for when you're studying these things, and noting that difference is something that can make quite a lot of can help you quite a lot in terms of getting somewhere with this. Let's look at some of the nose cartilage now. I'm going to make a bit more separation between all of this stuff. So we've got the cartilage at the end of the nose. So this is the alar cartilage. If you put your finger on the end of your nose, you should be able to feel kind of this groove, almost this separation. I always say that advisedly because noses are so variable, so if you can't feel it, don't worry. But I find that most people can kind of detect that. I'm just going to change the lighting a little bit here. Great. One key thing about the nose is that this is true of the body overall. I just want to draw your attention to this here is the hang on a minute, something's happening. And we just had a computer crash or a ZBrush crash. So that's the other thing you get when we go behind the scenes, is you get to see things go wrong on a technical level. But we're back where we were. And I was talking about the centre line down the nose, the nasal cartilage, the cartilage on the end of the nose, which is called the alar cartilage, and these two bumps. I'm going to replace a bit of the stuff I did because we lost some. There we go. And then we've got the way that this kind of tucks. Just change these brush settings a little. Not that one. Let's go for this. These two bits of cartilage kind of tuck into one another, and we've got the septum. This is the part of the nose that kind of divides the nostrils, and it's a good thing to sculpt or draw rather than the nostrils themselves, because if you put this in and you put the nostril wing in, you kind of get the nostril opening for free, if you can catch my drift. That's nearly always good advice, in fact, to if there's a slightly difficult area, try to work on what's around it rather than kind of worrying away at the thing itself, because I think that's when we get the slightly tortured look to our work that we might want to avoid. So instead of working away at the opening of the eye itself, try to work on all of the surrounding form and then see how things look after that. And it's really effective. Just that change of focus, that change of attention can really work wonders. Okay, so here we have the nasal cartilage taking shape. We're starting to get somewhere. I'm just going to work a little bit on integrating this temporalis into the rest of the head. Got a bit of an aggressive boundary at the moment. I think one thing that's hard to grasp when we're looking at making a dissection kind of model is that we want to make the muscles clear so we can understand them, but it's really, really easy to overstate them. And some of these muscles on the head are so delicate and thin that it can, you can really easily overdo it. So I'm always thinking about that and bearing that in mind, trying to get the balance right, I guess, between making them clear and not over exaggerating. The temporalis is a little bit different. It does have quite significant form to it, but definitely with the facial muscles, in terms of what we want as artists trying to understand the form, they're not primarily form makers. They affect things much more in terms of expression. So these are very, very thin and delicate. You're not really going to see these too often, the evidence of them. You know, round here we're going to really be talking about fat and skin, so soft tissue. Bit of another lighting change. I want to look at the mouth. This is another good point to tell you about, because when I'm doing these kind of sculptures or drawings, you want to kind of get it to read in a way that is memorable and works, and that it's got a kind of sculptural integrity, and that sometimes means taking a little bit of license with how things would actually be were you to dissect a real head. And so a great example would be the lips. I mean, the lips as they appear in life are going to be really sort of fatty forms primarily. So they're not going to look, in terms of the muscle, they're not going to look as full as I've made them here. But I do that just because somehow it's easier to grasp when this result is a bit closer to what you would expect to see. You know, and that's kind of debatable as to whether there's arguments for not doing that and kind of being true, as it were, to kind of medically what you would see. But I prefer to do it this way for the most part. So I'm just putting the muscle striations of the orbicularis oris into place, saving my work regularly. 3D software is really taxing on a computer, and so I only have a laptop, so it's kind of asking a lot really, so it's crashing is very much to be expected. Okay, so we're getting somewhere now, starting to come into place. I'm going to make a few more adjustments to some of the features. I might, for example, come in and tweak the way the nose looks, just to sort of get it a bit. I guess this comes down to presentation at this point. So what kind of look are we going for? What kind of facial expression and so on. These millimeter sort of changes I find really add up. It might sound obvious, in a way it is, but on the other hand, I think, you know, it's quite easy for us to sometimes forget that, because I guess what I'm saying is that the face has, you know, tiny changes are going to make a massive, massive difference on the face, whereas they're not so much if you're be drawing or sculpting a foot, you've got maybe much bigger margin for error. It's not as tight, but with the face it's kind of like as soon as you make a little inflection around the mouth, you can quite radically change the expression. And it's part of the fun of it, but well, when it's going well. But when it's not, it explains the difficulty. And when I'm coming in here, what I'm doing now is trying to reaffirm some of these plane changes. So I'm looking at this, you see that flat surface I'm just putting in? That kind of thing is really, really important with the nose, because even though the skin over the top of the nose is pretty thick, you still see the planes of the cartilage and very clearly through that sometimes, and you want to kind of preserve that sort of beveled look. So I'm just kind of doing the same thing here, just trying to get a sense of like how we try and see how we catch the light with that. Right, you see how we've got a light bit there, then dark, then light, then dark. That kind of stuff is really going to be part of what sells the believability of the features there. Okay, so that's all for this session. I hope that's useful. Please leave me your thoughts in the comments, because I'd be really interested to know if you think you want to see more like this, and you know, I'll keep posting a few, see what we come up with, but otherwise I'll see you in the next video, and please hit the like button if you like this video, and subscribe too, and if you can share it, that is such a big help to me, so I'd really appreciate it. Okay, that's all for now. See you soon.